But basically it's still a bit of a pest in many of the national parks around Alice and even out of the rock at the moment. They've basically got times when conservation volunteers will come in and actually pull out the buffel grass out there. Sometimes they'll burn it, and other times they'll use it for, well, basically they'll make roofs with it, stuff it into sacks and use it on top of shelters. Bit of water there on the left. That water puddle usually isn't there at all any other year other than this year. As I was mentioning before, you know, we only have about 250 millimetres of rain out here on average. Last year we only had 79 millimetres of rain, and for the previous 8 years before that it was only averaging about 100 to 150 millimetres a year. So before this was quite dry out here. A lot of the water holes were empty, even some of the ones that were more permanent. All the rivers were quite dry, but this year it's brought new life to absolutely everything. The rivers have flown pretty much everywhere around here. They've all had a good washout, and places where there wasn't bodies of water, there now is bodies of water. Out on Henbury Station, I went for a drive out there a few weeks ago, and he's actually got a low-lying area on the property, and this year, because of the massive amount of rainfall, that low-lying area has actually turned into a lake, and he's even had storks and brolgas and cormorants and darters, which are all coastal birds, down at the lake, or down at this new lake that he's got on the station. So certainly has been great out here for Central Australia, and great for everything really. The station owners are loving it. They're all stocking up with cattle again at the moment, and everything's in thrive mode. Well, one of the things that is thriving a lot out here again is, well, another introduced thing, camels. Basically camels, well, camels we have out here are single hump or dromedary camels, originally introduced around about the 1860s. 1840s they did trial it a little bit, but it wasn't really until the 1860s that they really took off. An explorer by the name of Burke and Wills, their party decided to use camels. That was a bit of an ill-fated journey, that one. They ended up dying somewhere out in Queensland. But it wasn't long after that that a few other explorers and pastoralists, as people started to move out here, more and more of them started to use camels to come into Central Australia. And when the original Garn line was set up, it used to actually run through more of the centre of South Australia, and run close to what's now called the Unadilla Track. Now the Unadilla Track runs right next to Lake Ayers, and also runs across a lot of the rivers and creeks that flow into Lake Ayers when it floods. Now it was because of that that they found when they did actually get the line up and going to Alice Springs, it used to get cut off a lot from floods. And sometimes what was meant to take a couple of days to get from Adelaide to Alice took a couple of weeks, sometimes a couple of months, and one time took almost a year. Of course, before they actually had the train running up to Alice, everything that was coming from a place called Maree down in South Australia was about as far very big animals. You can't put them in the same sort of truck as you use for cattle because they've got the big long necks. And even in a single deck trailer, you won't fit as many as you will with cattle. So in the end, they sort of, well, let that one pass by the wayside. So what they end up doing was going out and killing these camels, just leaving the bodies out there to basically rot or be eaten by other predatory animals out there. There is still talk of some station owners trying to get some funds together at the moment to try and build a mobile abattoir. And the idea of the mobile abattoir will be to go out to communities
about 10 o'clock, got a dip in them. Look in the dip, the top of the rock will slide in over there. Wow, there it is. Hey, there it goes. It's going to slide out the other end too. Wow. Did you see that? Good, because this is where we turn around and go home. Glad you got a good glimpse of it. No, we're going to go up here about half a kilometre. They were just dragging it in the spot then. And half a kilometre up here, we're going to see the whole thing. Alright, get ready for it. Should be able to sight, well, I don't know, we should be able to sight Carter-Judah. It's a bit hazy today, though. Now that's a little bit further away, but hopefully we'll get a little sighting of that. There could be just super dark or super, well, I don't know. We'll have a look in a sec anyway. First off, the rock. We'll come past this sand dune, 11 o'clock, through the trees. You're going to see a big rock. There it is.
There it is, yeah.
Ooh, Uluru. 1 o'clock, the other side of the road. Some of the lumpy, pumpy bits, are they there? Yeah, there they are. There they go, behind the dune. Top of the rock. All over. That happened pretty quick, didn't it? You want to do it again? Oh, thank God for that. Someone does. You want to do it backwards? Not in reverse. We've got no back window. But if you have a look backwards, 1 o'clock first. Some of the lumpy, bumpy bits of Carter-Judah above the dunes. 3, 2, 1. There they are. And then to the left. You're at the top of the rock. Righto. These things are going to go in and out of view from here on in. Right? No? Oh, what a shame. Look, there's a camel now. To the front of the bus. Good. So if we don't see any today, you've already seen one. Right, save us.
And some of them looked after them quite well. But it wasn't until the 60s they actually gained the ability to actually vote in Australia. And well, basically accepted as Australian citizens. After that, in the 1970s, the Aboriginal Land Rights Act came in and basically gave the Aboriginal people the right to claim areas of land as theirs. Now, to prove this, they had to prove that they'd lived in those areas for up to at least a minimum of 1,000 years. And to do that, they had to use things like their rock art, their petroglyphs, which is rock carvings, and their beliefs and their knowledge of those areas. Now, many of the areas in the 1970s that were handed back were areas of not much importance, you know, parts of a cattle station which weren't very fertile, areas where there was nothing to mine in. But it wasn't until, excuse me, the 1980s under the Hawke government that the Uluru actually made a case for Uluru and for handback of that. And it wasn't until 1985 under the Hawke Labor government that this area was handed back to the Uluru people after a very lengthy court case, or lengthy Land Rights Act case. Not long after that though, in 1987, they gained their first World Heritage Order under UNESCO, part of the United Nations, that is set up to basically try and help to conserve areas of natural and cultural beauty, or of cultural wonder. Now, the first one in 1987 was actually for the natural beauty and natural wonder of this place, the natural uniqueness of Carter-Judah and of Uluru. Then, not long after though, in 1994, they got their second World Heritage, which is actually for the cultural side of Uluru Carter-Judah. And what that did was gave basically significance to Chukapa and to the Uluru people beliefs and significance to the fact that it is part of Uluru. The Chukapa is part of these places. So that was a very significant one for the Unanu people. Now since then, as Tick mentioned, it was handed back, part of it. When the land was handed back, they took out part for the national park, and that was made on a 99-year lease from the Unanu people. But with the management of the park, even today, it's jointly managed between the park rangers and the Unanu people. Now, Unanu are actually part of a committee with park rangers, members of the Environment and Heritage Ministry, and also of tourism that basically assist over the running of the national park. And they run it on a system that the Unanu describe as, you learn from me, I learn from you. And that's how they help to work together in the management of the park. Now actually not long after that, in 1997, they actually won a Picasso Award from UNESCO, which was basically an award for how well the park had been put together and how the park had been growing since its first World Heritage Order. Anyway, that's enough about park history. What I'm going to do now is go way, way, way back before any of that stuff. And I'm going to try and give you a bit of an understanding of the geological history of Katajuda and of Uluru. If you're really close to one, just stand still. They have a very short attention span. And basically, even if they're reared up, if you stand still, they're most likely to just sort of sit there for a bit and then just go off again, because they've forgotten what they're even reared up at. If you are bitten by a snake, best thing to do, have a look at what it looked like. Because if you come back to us and say I was bit by a snake, the first question we're going to ask is, what did it look like? And from that, we can tell you, oh, okay, just put a bandage on it, slap you on the back, you'll be fine. Or, okay, everyone get around and let's start praying for this person and we'll just get that body bag ready underneath us. No, we won't really do that, but we'll put a compression bandage off and chuff you off to the medical centre back in Uluru. So, keep an eye out for them, guys. They are about. Best thing to do, just avoid them. Just out left-hand side, a place called the Docker River Road goes all the way out to Kalgoorlie in WA. Rough as bloody guts road though too, corrugated all the way. So you sort of sit there going like that all the way. Very not good for the spine. But out that way there's also a meteorological station called the Giles Meteorological Station, and it is actually an
turn right, yeah, turn to the train.
That big emu way down over there, mate. Over the dunes there, mate. Dragging that big spear with it. Said, oh, thanks, Lancarter. Off they went looking for the emu. Now, that was Lancarter's second mistake. Not only had he stolen the emu, he now lied. And out here in culture, you don't lie either. And he knew them blokes that were good bushmen, you know. It wouldn't take long to figure out he had the emu. So he went over, picked up all that emu meat, started to run back around to his cave to hide away with it. Got some bits of food. Of course, the crested bellbird hunters went out over the dunes over there. Couldn't even see a footprint from an emu, let alone an injured bird. So they come back over here to follow the tracks again. And they found where Lancarter had done battle with the emus. They knew he had it. Went over to where their big fire was. It was smouldering away, nothing but blood and feathers and stuff everywhere. But no emu meat, no Lancarter. So they headed around to his cave to find him. And on the way, find him bits and pieces of their meat. So eventually they got to the cave and they sung out to him, "Hey, Lancarter, chuck us down that emu meat. That's our big bird. We speared that one. Give us back our meat." Well, he wouldn't answer. Sung out again, he still wouldn't answer. So they went up and got a whole heap of sticks and branches, logs, packed them all against the base of the rock and lit it up. Chucked on green branches.
The lore, like the Lancarter story that Tip told earlier, it's also elements of their history. Now, with many of the Aboriginal people, many of the family groups used to have an animal or an object that represented that family group. And for this section here, it was the marla or rufous hair wallaby. Small wallaby, about that big. It used to be fairly common out here until the 1970s when they had a big fire go right through the whole park and killed a lot of the native animals out here with the fire. Now the story of the Marla people talks about Inma, the ceremonies, and that the Marla people out here once having an Inma. The men were set up over the other side there in that cave and the women around the other side of the rock. While they're in the middle of Inma, another group of Aboriginals came from the west and asked them to be part of their ceremonies. Now of course the Marla people refused because once you start Inma, you must keep going until the allotted amount of time is gone for that ceremony. So they refused the offer of the other group. The other group created a being called Kerpini, or sometimes referred to as devil dog. This Kerpini or devil dog came running around the other side of the rock and he ran into the women's area and chased the women out of the area and they ran into the men's area. Now of course when the women's and men's area, there is different ones for the two sexes. Women never went into a men's sacred site, men never went into a women's sacred site. That was men's business or that was women's business. And they both had their own different ceremonies and their own initiations. So that's why they never went into the different areas. As he came around, he took off and he scared the Marla people away and they all ran down towards South Australia. Now as I said, part of that story talks a bit of the history. And there is actually a town down in South Australia just below the border called Marla. So actually reckon it's where many of those Marla people ran away to, back down towards South Australia, and that's where they stay today. So let's head off on the walk, guys. That cave is actually about an old lady marsupial mole. Now the story goes that the old lady marsupial mole dug the holes in the rock there. She used to dig the holes in and then pop her head out and watch over the children. And she'd dig another hole in the rock and then pop her head out and watch over the children. So the story of that cave wasn't really history or lore, it was more about what it was actually used for. So it was a safe place for the children to be. Basically, nice place in summer, nice in the shade. In winter they used to light up a fire in there actually. There's heat marks on top of the roof of the cave. It used to actually be allowed into the cave until a few years ago when someone decided, well, basically they wanted to spice it up a bit by spray painting on it. Since then the cave's been closed off. A couple of trees I want to show you. These ones are the flowers. That's that beechwood we were talking about as we passed earlier. Remember the Hakea family? This one here is called Eucalyptus apoca, and it's actually, the common name for this one is desert bloodwood. Has a few uses by the Aboriginals. It has medicinal uses, it has food uses, and it even has tool uses. Now, medical uses, this plant's sap is a thick, dark red sap, hence the name bloodwood. When you actually see it, it looks like drops of blood on the ground. But the sap actually has antiseptic qualities. Now, what they used to do, if they had a large cut or wound, or a deep one anyway, they'd pack that sap over it, and the sap would kind of hold it together, usually with a bit of, they'd use some of the spinifex resin and a few other things, but mostly just the sap and a bit of kangaroo fat, pack that over the wound. Now, number one, the sticky sap would help to hold the wound together, and the antiseptic qualities would stop it from getting infected. So that was one of the uses. Food side of things, there's actually not any in these trees here, but out towards Catajuda and further towards Alice Springs, there's actually an insect that attaches itself to these trees. And when that insect attaches itself, the tree in a self-defense actually forms like a gall or a round casing around the insect, a bit like a cancerous growth. Inside this gall though, when it grows, if you cut it open, it has like a white lining on the inside. And the white lining actually tastes like a sour coconut. And of course, the actual name, well, common name for it is actually bush coconut. So you can eat the lining inside the gall, and also the insect, the female, has a sac on the back of her about that long, and you can sort of rip that off her and use that as a source of moisture or liquid. Another thing they use it for, tool-wise, making the bowls. You can see right here a cut mark where they've cut out a bowl out of this one. They cut into the bark there, peel that back, then make another cut down here. Voila, instant nice rounded bowl. And the women will use those bowls that often carried in the arm like that when they go out picking berries, like the rock fig fruit, and also we'll see a bit further up I'll show you some bush plums as well. And then also collect things like seeds. Seeds from these acacias, this one's called a dead finish, and mulga seeds as well. And the seeds they'd crush up into a paste, make into like a dough. Now they'd carry those things around, and also the small infants they'd carry in those. And sometimes out of human hair or animal hair, they'd make like a circular thing to put on their head and then rest the bowl on top of that, so that they could walk around and carry something else and have the bowl on top of their head. Another thing this dead finish is good for is actually helps get rid of warts. Put a couple of these spikes into a wart, take them out each day, put some new ones in. Within about 2 weeks it'll get rid of it. And no, we can't try it because it's in a national park, so we can't take them off. But it does work, I have seen it work, but not from in a national park. There is even treasures here which I've actually seen rock carving, but they're actually in some of the sacred sites.
A lot of them are faded. Over that way, Debbie, it's not faded, there's a snake. Which one? To your right. That one?
Big one.
There's a snake of some sort.
And also preserve the pain as well, you know. exposed to sunlight.
Right.
More food, more time to do artwork and that sort of stuff. So here, not as much food, so you need to use your resources as much as you can. Don't waste it on things like painting. Some of the stuff that is in here though, you may see like boomerangs depicted in there. There's a big long snake over the side there which represents a story of a water snake on the other side. Snakes are often represented around water because they associate water with rivers. And if you ever look at a river from the air, it looks like a big twisty snake, doesn't it? So that's where we've got the rainbow serpent hooks. There's some marler footprints just to the right of me as well, going up from the bottom right up to the top. And where's the other one? Then you've got sort of these big leaves in there. There's circles within circles always used to mean water holes. It's like when you drop a pebble into the water, you get the ripple marks go out. So I think I'll explain a bit more about the rock art on the other side to you anyway, and tell you a little bit about how they did rock art and why they did it and that sort of stuff. Things as dot painting though, if you ever see dot painting, what the reason that started about was actually they used to draw it all in the sands in the Tanami regions further north of Alice Springs. So they didn't have that many caves. And once there was a missionary out there who wanted to try and transfer the pictures in the ground onto a piece of canvas. And basically they put it on the canvas and there was a big piece of canvas that had all this room left. I said, okay, what are we going to do to fill up the rest of the space? Put some dots on there. Dot, 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 dot. That's how dot painting started. Filling up the space of the rest of the painting. But if you ever watch them do it though, it is a long, lengthy process. They'll never sketch all the pictures in between. They'll start from the top of the canvas and work their way down. And each dot is dip, dot, dip, dot, dip, dot. So it takes a bloody long time sometimes. I could never have the patience for it. Here is the actual natural true colour of Uluru. Now remember I said a lot of this is all that washed away sediment from the Peterman Ranges. A lot of it is Arkose. Well, it's all called Arkose sandstone, but Arkose is made up of granite and feldspar and other small pebbles that have been washed down and then compacted together. And you see like these shales or skins or scales on the side of the rock. You can see how some have got a bit of shadow underneath, and some of those pieces will eventually fall off, those little